A Healer's Gift. Adventures of Broad. Book 1. Adventures on Broad. Written by Tao Wong. Narrated by Eric Martin. Chapter 10. Damn, that's 6. Sighing, the guard hands his friend a silver piece and shoots Daniel's tired form an unfriendly glare at his loss. Who would have thought that another beginner would show up this late at night? Most of the beginners from this morning's batch had called it a day hours ago. Those that survived, that is. Daniel barely notices the look or the words, dragging his feet towards the awaiting Adventurers Guild. He had long ago eaten all the food and drunk most of the water he had carried down, and he just wanted this to be over. Adventuring seemed to take more energy out of him than even the mines, and he was thoroughly ravenous. Vowing to carry more provisions the next time, all Daniel wants to do is sell the mana stones he has collected and sleep. In the guild, Liev is finally coming to the end of his long shift when he spots Daniel. A flicker of relief breaks his professional facade, as Mary would have been thoroughly upset if Daniel had died. His demeanor restored, he calls out, "Working hard, I see." "Hi, Liev. Got a few stones for you." Daniel empties the pouch on the counter, the shower of mana stones making Liev raise an eyebrow. "That's quite a haul you have there." Practiced hands dance across the stones, pushing and sorting the stones by quality as he continues. "You went to the second floor, didn't you?" There are no rules barring that, Daniel. The guild does not monitor, condone, or judge such decisions, no matter how foolhardy," Liev states as he works on a piece of paper, totaling up Daniel's earnings. "How did you know?" "These here are all D grade 12 stones and 11 stones, what I'd expect to see from the first floor. These 3, though, are D grade 10s, which you'd only get if you were really lucky, or were hunting on the second floor." As Liev speaks, he points to each pile before he twists his pad around and shows Daniel his total. Knowing that some of their clientele are unable to read, he states as well, 4 silver and 3 coppers, third best haul among your group." Daniel nods jerkily at the announcement automatically, picking up the coins as Liev deposits them on the counter. A decent amount, though an experienced miner could earn 5 silver a day for much less risk. After a moment, Daniel recalls what the attendant said. "Third?" "Yes, 2 of the novices managed to find the chest on the first floor." "Chest?" Feeling like a parrot, Daniel leans forward. Truth be told, after his nasty encounter on the second floor, he had grown a lot more careful and worked the second floor with caution, checking each side passageway carefully before moving on. Unfortunately, that meant he encountered kobolds at a slower rate. "You didn't even look for it, did you?" Liev smiles, slightly bemused, reaching under his desk to pull out a mana stone. Almost the same size as the shards that Daniel has been bringing in, this one is noticeably clearer than his. "On each floor, there is a chest which contains a mana stone, which is a number of grades higher than what you'd find defeating the mobs on that level. It moves around after it is found, respawning every 2 to 4 hours, but it's always guarded by an elite of that floor. This one here is a D grade 8. "Oh." Daniel falls silent, tapping his fingers on the counter before looking up at Liev. "It's a matter of quantity over quality, then, isn't it? If I stay on the first floor, I'll be trying to find the chest to get a good, high-quality stone. If I go push down to the second floor again, I'll be able to fight more often, but it's more dangerous, and I wouldn't be able to get a chest yet." Liev nods, internally surprised that Daniel has come to that conclusion that quickly. Most adventurers take a while longer to work out those options by themselves. "Thank you, Liev. I'll keep it in mind." "Good night." Daniel waves goodbye, moving away from the counter. It's been a long day, and it's time to get to bed. "Morning, Daniel. Slept in, did you?" A laughing Elise waves him over to the bar, where she is busy cleaning up from the breakfast rush. "Breakfast will be out soon." Daniel nods, plopping down onto the stool. He has his gear with him already, but a good meal to start the day seems like a great idea. That and coffee. "So, Daniel, I know you saved my son and all." Elise smiles as she drops a plate before him along with a steaming cup of coffee. "But, I run an inn." Daniel blinks and then understands where Elise is leading with this and hangs his head slightly in shame. "Yeah, about that. How much for room and board for the week?" "Since you're almost like family, $1 a day for all the food you can eat, and we'll even wash your clothes," Elise pronounces unashamedly. Here you go." Daniel empties out the silver from his pouch, feeling how empty it is now. He shovels the last of the gruel in, already thinking of the dungeon and refilling his purse and his many expenses. He would need a new shirt soon if he continued being stabbed so often, a shield to protect himself, soap to wash his clothing, another purse so that he could separate his monastones from his coins. The list goes on. As he finishes, Elise waves him towards a wrapped box that she has placed on the bar. "Here you go, lunch and a snack." "Thanks, Elise. I'll be back late, I think." Scooping up the box, he stuffs it into his bag and hurries towards the dungeon. He definitely needed to do better than yesterday, his current and future expenses piling up before his eyes. Watching his departing back, Elise smirks to herself. They were all like that, getting lazy after their first run. A little kick in their ass was what they needed. Whistling to herself, Elise walks back to the kitchen to begin washing up. That boy would do well. Chapter 11. Waving to the guards as he passes them by, Daniel trots into the dungeon's first floor without slowing down. A single kobold didn't really pose too much danger to him from his experience yesterday, certainly not those that lived on the first floor. However, unlike most other adventurers, he had not bought a map, trusting to his own proficiency to glean the layout. Recalling his talk with Liev yesterday, Daniel decides to work out the full layout of the first floor by himself, and hopefully find that chest at the same time. Moving at a slower pace once he was inside the actual dungeon, Daniel still paces through the passageways at a faster rate, able to marvel at the strangeness of the dungeon. To his experienced eyes, the layout of the first floor made no logical sense as a cave network, even if it would to the ignorant. Small incongruities jumped out at Daniel. The floor was too smooth, the changes in the size of both the tunnels and chambers they joined making no natural sense, and each cavern too symmetrical. After encountering and killing a few more kobolds, Daniel even begins to realize that the layout seems to repeat itself. It takes Daniel almost 3 hours to make his way through 3/4 of the floor. He passes by a number of other novices, many moving more slowly and cautiously than he does. More than one pair have teamed up, an action that makes Daniel wonder before dismissing the option for now. At some point he would need help, but a part of him revels at working alone after years of working in teams in the mine. In addition, he feared that any adventurer he joined with would slow him down, and he had a lot of ground to catch up on. Not that I really want to deal with teenager angst either. Daniel chuckles to himself quietly, oblivious to the irony of his thoughts. As he nears the next corner, Daniel hunches forward to peer into the chamber. His eyes widen, and he pulls his head back, hiding again. Well, I found it. And him. Most kobolds were 4 feet tall at most, but the elite was obviously a paragon of its kind by standing at 4.5 feet and having actual visible musculature, at least what wasn't covered by what looked like badly stitched together soft leather armor. Thankfully, it was still armed with just a shiv. For a moment, Daniel hesitates. Then, recalling that it was just a kobold that at least 2 other beginners had beaten before him, he firms his resolve and steps out to meet the monster. The kobold spots him almost immediately, growling a low challenge as it crouches down in front of the small chest. Surprised that the elite doesn't attack him straight away, Daniel hesitates before taking a step forward and throwing a cautious strike. The kobold barely moves, seeing the feint for what it is. Daniel's eyes widen further in surprise at this unexpected reaction, and he stops, hovering outside of the kobold's reach. The kobold moves first this time, throwing a rock it concealed at Daniel. Instinctively, Daniel bats the rock aside and pays for it when his opponent lunges forward, plunging his weapon into Daniel's extended arm, twisting the blade as it exits to widen the wound. Before he can retaliate, the kobold dances out of range again and flashes Daniel a predatory smile. The next few passes have Daniel and the kobold cautiously trading blows, neither fully committing to the attack. Daniel receives another light wound on his thigh, the kobold suffering a bruised arm as it manages to foil a blow by pushing its arm forward into the mace's handle. Frustrated, Daniel engages his double strike to watch the kobold back away from the attacks, forcing Daniel to pursue him. A few more passes clarify Daniel's initial impressions. Little bugger's fast. Hold still, will you? Eyes narrow at a sudden thought, and then Daniel shifts to slightly wider swings, focusing on herding the kobold to a corner. It is his time to smile as the kobold realizes what is happening, but the human's greater reach foils the elite's ability to get away even as Daniel receives a few more light injuries. Finally backed into a corner, the elite is unable to escape its end beneath the mace, though a last-minute surge by the monster leaves its shiv planted in Daniel's thigh as it dies. Swearing to himself, Daniel collapses and tugs the shiv out of his thigh, slumping against the nearby wall as he takes his weight off his injured limb. A flash of red catches his eye at the passageway he entered, but he ignores it, focusing on healing himself first before turning to his notifications. Level up. Adventurer, level 3. You have gained 5 attribute points to distribute. Immediately, Daniel puts a few points into agility before he shuts the window. He will figure out the rest tonight, but it is obvious to him that he needs to be faster against these monsters. Smiling in glee at the thought of the mana crystal that awaits him in the chest, he pushes himself up. Was it open before? I was sure it wasn't. Dread filling him, Daniel walks over to the chest to find it empty, with no sign of the thief. Bad day? Liev asks the young adventurer as he sorts and counts Daniel's mana stones. A slightly raised eyebrow at the lack of a more powerful mana stone, especially since the number that Daniel brought back was actually less than before. In fact, the way the stones told the story, Daniel must have spent most of his day on the first floor. I fought and defeated the elite, but someone stole the stone while I was recovering, Daniel explains, looking morosely at the smaller number of coins Liev pushes forward as payment. Sighing, Daniel picks up the coins and puts them away. Ah, yes, that does happen occasionally, Liev shrugs. Thievery in the dungeon, while uncommon, was not unknown. Since there was no way to tell who owned a mana stone, thieves could steal stones with impunity in the dungeon, so long as they were not caught. Occasionally, bandits would even try their attempts at extortion or robbery, but those did not last long. Theft, while annoying, was an accepted part of adventuring life. Since the only place to sell mana stones were at the Adventuring Guild, any bandit who came back with too great a haul regularly was bound to be caught. Daniel nods glumly, having already decided not to make too much of a fuss over his loss. After all, he had no proof of who could have stolen his stone. Might I make a suggestion? Liev smiles slightly at the young adventurer, catching him just as he is about to leave. Of course. Daniel perks up, hoping for some earth-shattering advice from the experienced attendant. Surely he knew things that a young adventurer could learn. There's a bathhouse a few blocks from the top to the east. You'll find most adventurers find it prudent to visit the bathhouses every few days. Liev smiles gently, eyeing the dirty, smelly adventurer. Washcloth baths could only do so much, especially after a number of days fighting, killing, and bleeding in the dungeon. "Oh," Daniel blushes, realizing Liev's unspoken implication. "Right, thank you." With that said, Daniel rushes off to the top with what remains of his dignity. Chapter 12. 15, 16, 17, 18. Daniel sighs, staring forlornly at his small collection of coins as dawn light streams through the window. 1 gold, 18 silver. Still not enough to buy the shield he so desperately wanted. Armor, decent armor, was still a distant pipe dream, but a shield he could buy. Even with his skills and abilities, getting regularly wounded was becoming a pain. A knock on his door brings Daniel out from his morose musings. "Yes? Daniel, you're up?" Smiling, Elise looks him over. "I need a little favor." "What favor?" Daniel looks at the innkeeper, wary at her tone of voice. "Oh, nothing much. I just have a friend who needs some company today. You know, someone who needs to get out of work, stop doing the same things they've been doing nonstop." She smiles slightly, whilst looking at him knowingly. Well, I was going to go to the dungeon," Daniel mutters. He ignores the implication Elise makes, even though he has yet to take a break in the 3 weeks since he has first entered the dungeon. "It's fine, you'll love it. Anyway, you haven't really seen much of the town yet, have you? This would be a great opportunity, and it'd let you get in some shopping." She points to his rather threadbare, often patched set of clothing. A short 20 minutes later, Daniel is standing outside the spinning top, muttering about a wasted day and wondering who this friend was. When Kyra walks up, he can't help but smile at the blonde elf. He has barely had time to visit the clinic with his activities, and when he has done so, it has often been late at night after returning from the dungeon when Kyra was not around. "Kyra, it's good to see you." "And you. Did you see Elise?" Kyra is looking around, frowning. "She asked me to come over." Good, you're both here." Stepping out of the inn as she wipes her hands on her apron, Elise nods firmly. "Kyra, Daniel needs a guide around town. He's yet to actually see anything, and he could do with some new clothes, too." "What? Oh, and don't bother going to the clinic or dungeon. I told them not to let you guys in." Smirking, Elise walks back briskly into the top and shuts the door behind her. "Couldn't she be a bit more subtle?" mutters Kyra as she stares at the door, blushing slightly. "Yeah." Daniel agrees with her before he tilts his head, struck by a thought. "Do you mean shopping?" Smiling brightly, Kyra grabs his hand and drags him down the street. "I know just the place for some new clothing. Actually, I was saving up for something." "Something?" An arched eyebrow has Daniel quickly explaining. "A shield. I'm getting stabbed a lot, especially when I'm fighting 2 kobolds. It'd be nice to be able to guard one side properly. Nothing too big, of course. It's a bit cramped, you know, but yeah." Daniel trails off, realizing explaining the intricacies of using a shield to Kyra might be a bit much. "Then let's go." She tugs Daniel down the street, half dragging the man down to the river with her. "So, you're a mace and shield fighter, eh? I'd have thought Mary would have converted you to the sword." Daniel laughs, shaking his head. "She's amazing, but the sword requires real skill to use, you know, and the mace just feels right." "Oh, I get that. I hated the sword myself, especially in those tunnels. I could barely swing without hitting the walls at times." Kyra reminisces, miming a swinging action as she speaks. "You were an adventurer?" Daniel tilts his head to Kyra, bemused at the thought of the bubbly creature beside him in the depths of the dungeon, searching for kobolds and killing them with a smile. "Yes, I was one of the first to enter this dungeon, actually. Came here with my brothers." Kyra smiles, shaking her head, reminiscing. "We couldn't get the reward for completing it first, though, and they left soon after. I decided to stay for a bit. Here we are." Daniel nods comfortably as she talks. both of them weaving through the busy morning traffic. It takes him a moment to realize that the last sentence wasn't part of the initial conversation, and he looks up to spot the sign of an armorer swinging above him. Even as he gets pulled inside, Daniel realizes where they are. "Maxwell, I have a customer for you. We need your best shields," Kyra announces as they enter the armory, the forge at the back increasing the temperature a few degrees even out at the front of the shop. Stepping away from his forge and beckoning to an apprentice to take over, Maxwell grins as he spots Kyra. "Definitely not for you. Oh, it's you." He nods firmly to Daniel while he gestures behind him to where the shields hang. "Stock hasn't changed." Daniel smiles politely, stepping further into the shop to survey the pair of styles available. A simple buckler and a larger wooden round shield, both banded by metal, are his choices. His fingers trace the wooden round shield with lust, the larger shield perfect for his fighting style, and what he has been saving up for, before he looks to Maxwell and asks, "Gold and 50 still?" Maxwell nods before Kyra clears her throat loudly. "You know, Max, Daniel here has been helping out a lot at the clinic lately. Why, he helped me deal with that rather nasty situation with Peony and her friends." "Peony?" Maxwell's face goes blank. Well, if he's been the one helping you, Kyra, a gold and..." A slight smile from Kyra makes him stop. "A gold." Daniel watches the byplay, a small part of him feeling slightly guilty about the deal. It is only a small part, though, as he snatches up the shield and pushes the gold into Max's hand. "Thank you. A gold it is." The pair spend the rest of the day shopping, stopping by to pick up some basic household supplies for both themselves and some additional supplies for the clinic. Kyra occasionally name-drops Daniel and his connection to the clinic, though Daniel finds it hard to understand when and why she does so. After a time, he gives up on it and just enjoys her company, the two chatting amicably about Kyra's past exploits and the city. While they shop, Kyra takes her role as guide seriously, pointing out reputable shops and food establishments, as well as laying down town gossip with undisguised glee. Having lived in the city for over 20 years and one of the original inhabitants, Kyra is a fount of information about local history, and more than once Daniel is amazed by the knowledge that she exhibits. It is clear to Daniel that Kyra holds a deep affection for the town and its inhabitants, one that she is happy to impart to him. Evening finds them on a hill overlooking the town at Kyra's bequest, a small indulgence that takes her away from the city. The first snows of the winter have yet to arrive, so while the evening has a brisk air to it, they were still dry, and the chill kept the hill empty except for themselves. As the sun sets, Daniel takes a moment to truly look at the town he has spent so many weeks in. Karlak is bisected a third of the way in its circumference by a river, surrounded by a lightly patrolled wooden wall. Built between the rolling forested hills that make up the vast majority of the lands around here, Karlak draws its stone and ore from the distant mountains that Daniel came from. Lying on the outer frontier of Broad's borders, the town is surrounded by unexplored forests, connected by a network of dusty roads. The vast majority of the buildings in the town are made up of the easily secured wood, clay tiles, or dirty rushes marking differences in prosperity from the hilltop. "You puzzle me, Daniel." Kyra, propped up on her elbow, stares at the young man next to her, interrupting his thoughts. "Are you really that naive, or just that nice?" "Huh?" Daniel, caught off guard, blinks at the non-sequitur. "You don't exploit your gift. You don't even mention your connection to the clinic to the merchants we visit, yet you use it without hesitation." "Ah," Daniel sighs, flopping over to stare up into the darkening sky. That question. Why always that question? He raises his hand up, shading himself from the non-existent sunlight for a moment before he speaks. "My grandfather, he used to say, 'Do good, just don't ever expect gratitude.' What I do, when I heal, it isn't for them." "Then who is it for?" "Me." Daniel shuts his eyes. He falls silent, letting the word stand between them. Unwilling and unable to explain the extent of guilt that he harbors, that comes from having a gift like his and not exploiting it to the fullest. The constant pressure by others the moment his gift manifested, the constant demands to use it, to be someone important. The pressure and the fear of even more were why he didn't speak of the extent of his gift, both its cost and its full ability. The less people knew, the less they could use against him. This way, they could ask, they could suspect, but they couldn't know. Pursing her lips, Kyra watches the play of emotions on his face before making up her mind. She swings her leg over his prone body, straddling him to lay a kiss on his lips. As his eyes pop open, she smiles. "Well, Elise did set this up, so are we?" Laughing, Daniel rolls her over and returns the kiss, banishing deeper considerations for the moment.